are back. Welcome back to the Premier League prediction series. It is now time for Game Week 23 of the Premier League season, the reverse of Game Week 1. So it's a proper time for you guys to reflect on how all of your teams have performed so far over the season, and we get a chance to see how far they've come since they had their opening fixtures of the season. Of course, if you are new around here, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because once again, we'll be going back to the Champions League and the Europa League for the final match days in those competitions. Next week, we've had another really great week on the predictions when it comes to Champions League and Europa League. So thank you, as always, for all of your support on those videos. And don't forget to drop a like on this video as well if you do enjoy all of the prediction series on this channel. Let's move ahead to the prediction screen then, where you will see after Premier League Game Week 22, we got 6 out of 10 in that, meaning we're now on 111 out of 219. No correct scores in the Premier League, but a decent week in the Champions League and the Europa League means that we are way up on 50% when it comes to the season result, and another 2 correct scores in Europe as well. So we're doing pretty well for the season. As for Game Week 1, like this is the repeat of, we got 5 out of 10 that week. So let's see if we can do any better with the reverse fixtures, kicking things off with an absolutely massive 3 o'clock game. Why this game isn't being televised, I don't really know. But what I do know is that we have no early kickoff on Saturday. That game has been moved to late on Sunday, which will be our last prediction of the day. But the opening game sees 7th place Bournemouth taking on 3rd place Nottingham Forest. Probably the side with the greatest form in the Premier League right now. Bournemouth are 11 games unbeaten, winning 7. Nottingham Forest are 9 games unbeaten, so less games unbeaten, but winning 8 of those 9. So they have actually picked up more points in fewer games, even though both sides are unbeaten. But last week, it was all about Bournemouth in that early kickoff against Newcastle. An incredible 4-1 away win for them. For Forest, I think it was a little bit of a wobble last week. They went into a commanding position, but let Southampton back into it, which meant it finished 3-2. And for a side that's been so defensively solid, against a side that's just put 4 past Newcastle, who themselves have been very defensively solid, I can see this one being a very, very tough one to call. In terms of injuries and suspensions, there are no fresh ones for either side, but obviously for Bournemouth, they are still in the midst of an injury crisis and they haven't got anyone back and available for this game. There's obviously a lot of question marks about new signings. Forest trying to get the likes of Matheus Cunha, Johan Visser in the club, but they haven't been able to secure anyone ahead of this week's game. I'm going to expect a really, really tough match here. The last game between these two sides was a 1-1 draw at Forest earlier on in the season. The result of Bournemouth last season was a 1-1 draw as well. However, I just think from what I saw last week that it's just going to go in Bournemouth's favour here. I'm going to go for 2-1 to Bournemouth, which would end Forest's incredible, impressive run and dent their chances at catching up to league leaders Liverpool. But I just think right now Bournemouth are the side that are going to edge it. Next 3 o'clock game, it sees Brighton taking on Everton, and 2 sides that got really good victories last week. Brighton winning 3-1 at Old Trafford, Everton getting the win over Tottenham. But in terms of their actual overall form, it is Brighton who are on the far superior run in that regard. It's 7 games unbeaten for Brighton with 3 wins in a row, whereas that win for Everton was actually their first since December the 4th in the Premier League. Not only that, Brighton won 3-0 at Goodison on the opening day of the season, but actually, to contrast that a little bit more, this fixture has not been won by the home side in any of the last 8 meetings stretching back to 2020. Not a single home win, with 5 of those 8 matches going in favour of the away team, which obviously includes the game at Goodison Park earlier on in the season. So it's a bizarre situation, this one. In terms of injuries and suspensions, again, no one is freshly injured or suspended for either of these sides. Brighton have let Enciso go to Ipswich, which I do think is a bit of a weird one in my opinion. But Jorginho Rutter has started to step up in the last couple of matches for them. Meanwhile, Everton, again, they just... For me, the game against Spurs, against a very depleted Spurs, is an opportunity to score goals. Against a Brighton side that doesn't give up anywhere near as many chances as what Spurs does, the question once again remains, can Everton get the goals to get the victory? Since going into that game last week, they hadn't scored in any of their previous 3. I'm not convinced Everton have got enough to go to Brighton and get a result. I think Brighton are playing the better football at the moment, so I'm going for yet again a 2-1 victory, this time to Brighton. But we'll see. I'm giving Everton a goal. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. Can it go all the way to getting a result? Next up is, and I hesitate to say, I believe the easiest prediction of the weekend to call, because I said that in the Europa League and Galatasaray drew 3-3 with Dynamo Kiev. And, well, it'd be hilarious if Ipswich did manage to go to Anfield and get a 3-3 draw. But let's be honest. Let's look at the facts. Liverpool are top of the league. They've managed to not essentially slip up in these really tough run of games. They got the draw away at Forest. They got the win away at Brentford. They got the win at home to Lille. All games that I thought they'd struggle to get results in. They've managed to do enough to not lose their lead at the top of the table, as in like the gap at the top of the table has not shifted. They've managed to extend their position at the top of the Champions League. And Ipswich just lost 6-0 to Manchester City after losing 2-0 again earlier on the week before. So there is a real contrast in form between these two sides. Yes, I think Ipswich have done some really good business over the course of the week. As we just mentioned, they've got Enciso on loan from Brighton. They've also brought in Philogene from Aston Villa. Both of those are going to be available for this one. But for Liverpool, Diogo Jota could be back. The only player injured for them at the moment is Joe Gomez. And with their position already secured in the Champions League, they can rest all of their players in their final Champions League game and play their absolute full first team here against Ipswich. For me, I don't know why I'm dragging this out any longer than I necessarily need to. I'm going for a 4-0 victory to Liverpool. Final game, I believe. No, there's two more games at 3 o'clock on Saturday. And the first of those is Southampton taking on Newcastle. And this one might not be as easy to call as people may think. I think for the second week running, Southampton have put in a pretty decent performance. Obviously, they were good at Old Trafford before succumbing to the comeback from Manchester United. Then last week, a poor start at Forest, but they showed some fight, showed some resilience, and almost got something at Nottingham Forest last week. The problem is, of course, they've still lost both of those games, but at least they showed some serious fight to try and keep their chances of survival alive. Newcastle, on the other hand, showed little to no fight when they succumbed in that 4-1 defeat to Bournemouth at St James's Park last week. So you need a turnaround from Newcastle if they're going to get a result here, because we know that Southampton are going to show some spirit, and who knows, they might just produce something. Again, fitness and suspensions. For me, I don't see any fresh concerns for either side. There's a little bit of doubt over Tyler Dibbling, who of course didn't play last week. Not just about his fitness, but about his future, with the likes of Spurs, Leipzig, and some suggesting even Newcastle themselves eyeing him up for a fee of around 50 million. Potentially not in this window, but most certainly in the summer. For Newcastle, it's going to be a question of who plays in the back line now that they've got Cher, Botman, and Burn all available to play as the two centre-backs. Which two are going to start remains to be seen. On the opening day of the season, this match was a 1-0 victory to Newcastle, but I think we're going to see a hell of a lot more goals in this one than we did on that day, just how the two teams have been playing over the last few weeks. I'm still going to go for Newcastle, but I'm going to go for a 4-2 victory to the side from up north. Final 3 o'clock game sees Wolves taking on Arsenal, where Wolves, after a very good start under Vitor Pereira, have slipped back into old habits. They are now 3 defeats in a row in the Premier League, conceding 3 goals in all of those 3 games. For Arsenal, it was a good bounce back from them against Dynamo in midweek. But let's be honest, I think on paper, Wolves are a better side than Dinamo Zagreb. And now, obviously, Arsenal are travelling to Wolves as well. So a little bit of a harder fixture on paper. That said, Arsenal have actually won all of their last 7 matches in a row against Wolves and have only conceded 2 goals across all of those 7 games. In terms of injuries and suspensions, Lewis Skelly is the latest Arsenal player to pick up a knock, although Zinchenko filled in for him pretty well against Zagreb in midweek. Obviously, Saliba is still the one that they're trying to rush back to full fitness, but I would be surprised if he makes it back for this game. For Wolves, there's no injury or suspension concerns, but there might be a few mental concerns over Matheus Cunha, who seems to be a little bit off the boil since the rumours of him potentially leaving to either a top club in the Premier League or potentially a top club abroad as well. And without him performing, it's not been a good run of form for Wolves. And obviously, one of the clubs being linked with him is Arsenal as well. So an opportunity for the club to speak to him during, if not after, the game as well. For me, this is Arsenal's game to lose. I think it'll be an interesting one, though. I'm just going to go for a 2-1 victory to Arsenal. The late kickoff on Saturday is a massive one. It's Manchester City against Chelsea. And after City's good run of form, their frailties came back on full force in the Champions League in midweek. A 2-0 lead and then an utter collapse against Paris Saint-Germain. 4-2 defeat for them. Meanwhile, Chelsea bounced back from their poor performance against Bournemouth with a very good win against Wolves at the weekend. Despite carrying an injured Cole Palmer throughout that match, he should be back to full fitness for this one. For Manchester City, though, they have spent £120 million this week, and all three of those signings will be eligible to play in this match against Chelsea. So it's just going to be a question of how many of those are going to be available for this one. On the opening day, City won at Stamford Bridge 2-0. But if we're being honest, I don't think there's a single fixture in the Premier League this weekend that shows a contrast in how these teams have flip-flopped since that opening weekend. I think it's going to be a tight one. I don't trust either of the defences going into this match. I honestly think this scoreline could be absolutely anything, but I'm just going to edge it in favour of City. I'm going for a high scorer. I'm going for 3-2 to Manchester City. That then takes us on to Sunday, and we have two early kickoffs on Sunday. The first of those is Crystal Palace taking on Brentford. For Palace, it's now 6 games unbeaten and 3 wins in a row. For Brentford, it's 3 games without a win, and their form has just started to slide recently. Maybe the likes of Visser are starting to have their heads turned by the interest from Nottingham Forest, although to be fair, he has still been scoring over the last few weeks. But it's Palace that I think we need to focus on coming into this one. They're playing some great football again at the moment. They're working their way back up the Premier League table. They've made some decent signings over the course of the last couple of days. Of course, the most notable of those is Esse from the Premier League, from the Championship. That's going to be confusing, having Esse and Eze in their attacking line, but be interested to see how he performs. For Brentford, it's unclear at the moment if Coyote is going to be registered in time for this one, but could be a good signing for them as well. In the previous fixture coming into this one, it was a 2-1 victory for Brentford at the G-Tech. Obviously, they're so good at home, but they are shocking away from home, which does include their 3-1 defeat to Palace at Selhurst Park last season. However, before that, the last 5 matches between these two sides were draws. And despite all the bigging up I've done for Crystal Palace over the course of this prediction, I'm actually going to go for a draw here. I have a sneaky feeling that Brentford are going to get something. So I'm going to go for 1-1. If Palace win this 2 or 3-0, I'll hold my hands up and apologise. But you know when you just get those feelings? I think Brentford are going to get something from this game. The other early kickoff on Sunday is Tottenham taking on Leicester City. And, well, if there were ever any sides that need a result, it is these two right here. Tottenham currently sit 18th in the form table in the Premier League. The good news for them is that in 19th is Leicester, who are actually somehow managing to do even worse than Spurs are at the moment after Leicester have lost all of their last 7 Premier League games in a row. For Spurs, they were finally able to get a decent result, in my opinion, with their victory last night against Hoffenheim, despite Ange Postecoglou's whinging and moaning about the amount of injuries and how they only have 13 first team players available to them. Well, my response to that would be, so do Bournemouth, and look at how well they're performing with the 13 first team players they've got available to them. That is the job of football management, is to get the most out of your players. And certainly Ange Postecoglou is failing to do that at the moment. But also, so is Ruud van Nistelrooy, as proven by those 7 defeats in a row. They also have a fair few players injured, do Leicester. No new injury concerns for them, but no players back. For Spurs, again, it doesn't look like they're going to have anyone back for this one. The game at the King Power was a 1-1 draw, but even though Spurs have been performing badly, they're still averaging 2 goals a game, whereas Leicester have only scored 2 goals in their last 7 matches. So just on the balance of how many goals could be scored in this match, I have to go for Tottenham here, especially at home. I'm going for a 3-1 victory to Spurs. Then we have the main event slot of the week, which is between Aston Villa and West Ham United. Two sides that met just 2 weeks ago, and on that occasion, it was a 2-1 victory to Aston Villa. In fact, when these two sides met on the opening day, it was also a 2-1 victory to Aston Villa. Now, for Villa themselves, they failed to capitalise on that momentum gained from their 2-2 draw with Arsenal by then slipping to defeat away at Monaco in the Champions League. For West Ham, they also failed to back up a good performance against Fulham by losing 2-1 at home to Crystal Palace last weekend, which saw Mavropanos sent off. And actually, he is the only player across all of the 10 matches that is suspended for this Premier League game week, Mavropanos. No other suspensions for the entire game week. For Aston Villa, they're going to be without Amadou Onana. He looks like he's picked up another hamstring injury, so he'll be joining the injury list, including the likes of John McGinn and Pau Torres. As it looks at the moment, West Ham still don't really have a proper recognised striker. For whatever reason, Potter's not starting Danny Ings. He's playing Paqueta. Looks like they're in talks to sign Andre Silva, though. Whether or not they can get that deal done today so he can play in time for Sunday, I don't think that's really possible. But as I said, the last two matches between these two sides have ended in a 2-1 victory to Aston Villa. So who am I to say that this one's going to go any differently? So once again, I'm going for a 2-1 win to Aston Villa. And then finally, the 7 o'clock kickoff on Sunday sees Fulham taking on Manchester United. And I've had this prediction pretty much locked in since the moment I saw this fixture. And after what I saw last night from Manchester United, that prediction hasn't changed, which is a 1-1 draw. Because Manchester United away from home have certainly been much better. We saw it against Arsenal, we saw it against Liverpool. At the moment, we're a side that likes to be attacked. We like to absorb pressure and then pick our moments to go forward. But ultimately, we're not that good in front of goal, as proven by the amount of chances missed against Rangers last night. For Fulham, their home form hasn't been bad, but it's not been great either. They're unbeaten in their last 4 home games, but they've drawn all 4. Hence, again, why I'm going for a draw here. For me, it just seems to be that sort of game where Fulham are going to go for it. We'll absorb the pressure. We'll possibly get one on the break, but we'll also possibly concede one. It wouldn't surprise me to see a 0-0 here as well. The only reason I've not gone for that is because at the game at Old Trafford earlier on in the season and the game at Craven Cottage last season, both games ended 1-0 to Manchester United with late winners from the likes of Bruno Fernandes and Joshua Zirkzee. But I don't fancy us to get a clean sheet with 13 matches, I think, now in a row without a clean sheet, which is why I'm giving Fulham a goal. It's why I'm going for a 1-1 draw. And that will conclude today's predictions video. As always, if you have enjoyed, don't forget to drop a like and don't forget to let me know all of your thoughts down in the comment section below. I'll be back with that post-match reaction to Fulham Manchester United on Sunday evening. And then, of course, Champions League football for the final time in the group stages will be back on Monday morning. Thank you very much for watching once again. I'll see you very soon.